Good morning, everyone. It is awesome to be here on Monday morning. I always like to start with an exercise, so if you do not have any mobility impairments, if you could please stand up. I know it's Monday morning. Sorry. All right, if you could raise your hands, you have the right idea. If you could raise both of your hands in the air. I'm sorry if you're holding a cup of coffee or a laptop. Okay. I think there's some people, I think you can raise your hands just a little bit higher. Really get that stretch in because we're at the beginning of the conference. Some of you may have been stuck this morning on the subway. All right, so for those of you who can see the slide, don't look at it. But on 3, we're all gonna raise our hands just a little bit more. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Stretch. All right, you can all sit down. The point of this exercise is you can always reach a little bit higher. I had nice slides for this, so. Cool. I also have that activity because sometimes it takes AV to get set up for a little bit. Good morning, everyone. The title of my talk today is A Few Good Public Servants, How Great Analysis Inspires Action. And I'm really excited, you guys. I took a look at the agenda for the conference upcoming, and it looks like a really jam-packed panel lineup you all have for the next couple days. And so there's a few things that I would like to talk through. Uh-oh, do we lose the... Yeah. It's fine. I can do it off memory. That's good. We're good. If you just hit Yep. Cool. All right. What's that? That's fine. I'll just go off. Yep. Cool. All right, so you can always reach a little bit higher, moving forward. So I'm actually here to tell you all a few stories. There are a handful of different stories I want to talk about. You have here just a map of the United States. And because I think for a lot of us who work in data and analytics, a lot of our work is actually about storytelling. So I'm going to tell you all a few stories from my time working in DC at the Obama White House for the last decade or so, helping to stand up Boston's data team and analytics team. And then I'm going to talk about how I traveled a bit throughout the country and how I landed in New York City, even though I am actually a native of the state of Massachusetts, the great state of Massachusetts. And so the story goes, I had spent quite a while in DC, and a lot of things have changed since 2016. I actually gave a PyData keynote in October 2016. I think a couple weeks right before the election happened. And although I think if anybody turns on the news, you may know that a lot of things have changed. I'm going to talk about today a few things that have remained the same, regardless of where you are in our country. And I think a huge part of that has to do with continued civic engagement, which I think is particularly true here in New York City. This is actually my first time living here over the last year, and I've really seen how active you all are. And I think what is truly remarkable is I think within the civic tech and data community, just how active folks are in policy spaces. This is definitely not true. I will not name other cities, but there are a lot of other cities out there where the turnout is not this spectacular on a Monday morning. And here in New York City, I definitely, within the mayor's office of data analytics at City Hall, the work that we do builds upon a foundation of incredible work that has happened. You have here a photo of quite a few students at the very first hackathon held inside of City Hall here in New York City. It should be no surprise that as part of this hackathon, as this hack league hosted by PyData NYC and CS for All within DOE here, the kids built quite a few things that I actually wanted to scale throughout the city. So there's a lot of incredible talent here happening within New York. But I'm actually going to start today's conference session talking about sidewalks. I have a very, very good friend of mine who describes public policy as thinking of a sidewalk and thinking of a sidewalk curb. I think what is really interesting for a lot of you is when you think about public policy, first, a lot of people really struggle to define what is public policy. I think even people who may have MPP, MPA degrees really struggle with that. And she always talks about the fact that a sidewalk curb ramp is public policy actually in action. And I know people don't think about this, but if you think about millions and millions of New Yorkers who walk down the sidewalk, the fact that the sidewalk does not just end when you reach the street, the fact that it slopes down, and the fact that individuals with mobility impairments, parents with kids in strollers, can not just fall off where the sidewalk ends, that's actually public policy in action. And I think for a lot of you who work in data and analytics, I certainly spend a lot of my day-to-day time trying to figure out how do I demonstrate what we do on a day-to-day basis within the data team. So what is this analog? What is the image of analytics in action? And I haven't figured this out yet. So the closest image I currently have is this. It is on the left-hand side. I just took a local law that actually names the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics. We'll talk about it in a little bit. We got actually written into the city charter late last year. And on the right-hand side, we have some code up. And what was really interesting is we had a new data scientist join our team 2 weeks ago. And Adrienne Schmoker, who is the Deputy Chief Analytics Officer, said she walked over to our data scientist's screen, and she literally had a local law up on one side and code up on the other side. And I said, well, that's a pretty good visual of thinking about how analytics works within government, in particular in local government. It is thinking about the intersections of these pieces. The piece that's actually missing in that image that you all saw, it's very clear that this person is coding and it's late at night and they're reading, is this component that I sometimes think a lot of analysts forget and a lot of techies forget, which is you have to talk to people. This is actually a framework within the Civic Service Design Lab, which is hosted by NYC Opportunity, a sister agency to us at the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics. And Mari, who heads up that team, we were sitting down, I think a week ago, and she said, a thing that we always do and we have to do in government is talk to people. And I know it sounds so incredibly simple, but it's something that people often forget to do. And I think in particular in government, and I won't speak to other industries that are represented here in the room today, but in particular to government, to local government, it is actually a part of our jobs to constantly talk to people. Because we deliver services for them, because we engage with them every day, and because ultimately we're accountable to those that we speak to. I actually cut this out and it's in my office. I've been obsessed about this tweet that Nate Silver tweeted. I'll read it out loud so everybody can see it. If you want to be a good data scientist, you should spend 49% of your time developing your statistical intuition, how to ask good questions of the data, another 49% of your time on domain knowledge, improving overall understanding of your field, and only 2% on methods per se. And this, to me, was a little bit of an aha moment, because a lot of those percentages can only be accounted for by actually talking to people. And so I think this is particularly true in government, where there's been a huge push to be more data-driven, to do a lot of data for good initiatives. And I think it's becoming increasingly important for all of us to work on responsible analytics. And we can only do that when we engage with stakeholders and with individuals. I want to pause for a moment. These are not images from the city of New York. These are two images that I've just kept in my photo bank. Because for anyone who really, really likes complex problems, welcome to government. So these are two photos from server rooms that I've collected over time, not the city of New York. Here you have some wires next to some water, next to a plugged-in toaster oven. On the right-hand side, you have wires that I swear were really organized like 2 days before that photo, and then we opened up the closet again, and then it looked like that 2 days later. And I show you all these photos, not just so you can have a chuckle on Monday morning, but because a lot of the work that we do is really, really messy. And I don't just mean on the data front. You all are used to dealing with a lot of data and trying to figure out how to make sense of all of that information. For us within government, it's also everything else. It's the policies, it's the programs, it's the agencies, it's the people who are underlying them. And I think for anyone who really, really enjoys a challenge, this is constantly top of mind, is if you look at that and you're like, I want to fix that, I want to clean that up, I want to help people have cleaner closets, server closets. It's a lot of the work that we do. And I think that it's really, really easy oftentimes when you all see what governments, what agencies, even the rest of this presentation that I'm about to give, and think, wow, it's so clean and easy and da-da-da. And I'm like, it's actually really messy. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of work by a lot of teams in order to make sense of a lot of what we're working on. And so rewinding to 2015, I was feeling pretty good about myself. I was at the city of Boston. We had done what I kind of shared with you all. We were talking to people. We were making sure that we talked to a lot of city agencies and better understood what was happening. And we were doing some good work there, the data team. We actually worked with the fire department there, and we built out the Building Intelligence Systems tool. And we integrated a ton of information, and we piloted a tool where firefighters and fire dispatch could actually, on demand, be able to figure out what kind of hazards were located where within particular buildings. This is, of course, incredibly important to any public safety response for any city. And what was really neat about this was that it was actually one of the firefighters' ideas there in Boston. He had, just like if you may go to Europe and you're like, I'm going to this particular city and I'm going to drop a bunch of pins down of all the cafes and restaurants that I would like to go, he had actually created a Google map where he just dropped a bunch of pins of buildings that had hazards in them. And we said, actually, we can take that, we can level that up, we can help you actually build a tool for that. And so we felt pretty good, you know? Built a couple of things. This is an image of the mayor's dashboard. This is Dan Coe, his former chief of staff in Boston for Mayor Walsh. And we felt pretty good. We actually delivered rotating dashboards in the city. I will never live this down. I never want this title again, but I was known as the dashboard queen, which I never want that title, but now I've told you all. And what was really interesting is another big component of great analytics, of great analysis, is you want your information, your data to be visual and to be actionable. And so for us, that meant how do we get in front of the executives and the leaders? And what is something that they actually look at every single day? Well, just so happens a wall across from the mayor's desk within his office. And this was something that the mayor still to this day uses. Think about a lot of the dashboard requests for anybody who works in probably finance or really any industry, your executives or leadership is looking for a dashboard. They are looking for what are insights. So the mayor would look at the information that was presented to him and be able to call chiefs, to be able to call departments and actually ask some questions. Why have your numbers gone up over the last season, over the last week? What are some things that we could do to fund better programs? And so for us, this was really a starting point. And so I, again, feeling pretty good about myself, built some shiny things within the city of Boston, and got a call one day from the White House. And I had worked within the Obama White House within the Domestic Policy Council in 2012, 2013, and had gotten a call in April of 2016, and they said, would you be interested in coming back? And I said, you only have a couple months left, so I'm not exactly sure what you're going to be doing in the last couple months of the administration. And then they said, well, you should talk to DJ Patil about it. And I said, okay, no one can tell DJ this in case you know him, but DJ, who is the very first US chief data scientist and who many folks say co-founded, co-coined the term data scientist for anyone here who has that actual title. I hopped on the phone with DJ and then ended up flying down to DC, and he said, you know, what's really interesting is that we're trying to make sustainable a lot of the work that we're doing within the administration. And one of the ways to do that is how do we infuse the practices within state and local governments? Because there's all this incredible work that's been done at the federal level, but what does it actually matter if we're not touching people's lives on the ground? And so I, as I usually do, was like, DJ, what am I going to be working on? Who am I going to be working with? And he said, you should come up with your own operating thesis. I said, I am sold. I will come to DC on that premise. I will fly down over a weekend and come work for a couple months. And it just so happens that I arrived and I really, really thought that I would be working on sensor technology, drones, IoT, really anything buzzwordy at the national level, working in partnership with state and local governments. It actually happened that there were a series of incredibly terrible shootings, July 2016. And it had stirred up a federal conversation across states and counties and cities about what were we doing around criminal justice reform and the criminal justice system. And it just so happened that I was on the data and technology team, working with DJ, working with Megan Smith, the US Chief Technology Officer. And I ended up working on the criminal justice system. And I didn't expect that at all. And I won't go too far into the weeds here to share with you all, but the very first thing I did, because I knew nothing about the system, was to talk to people. And that's what I said a couple slides ago. This is something that President Obama has done again and again, and that I think many, many great leaders, doesn't matter if it's in the public or private sector, do. They talk to people. And so it was with that I really started to understand that in these last 6 or 7 months as a part of this work, I would be faced with a much bigger challenge that wasn't just about building shiny tools or dashboards or visualizations. It was how do we tell the story using data and technology to make national and federal change? And this was one slide that I probably have put a couple thousand miles down, traveling around the country with this one sentence. Every year, 11 million people cycle through 3,100 local jails, costing $20 billion. The 3 largest mental health facilities throughout the country are the country's 3 largest jails, which I will not name here. And in those local jails, 64% have a mental illness, 68% have a substance use disorder, and 44% have chronic health problems. And for us, when we talk about the criminal justice system, We look at what the Pareto analysis is of what all the people who are in those systems and whether or not they're getting the help that they need. And for me, as simple as these two slides are, another big note about great analysis inspiring action is to filter your message and to get it to a point where you can be crisp about exactly what you are talking about, what the problems and issue areas are, and to actually grab people with what you're talking about. And so I'll take you all back in time. I have since visited, I think, at least 5, if not more, jails throughout the country, county jails throughout the country. And my very first experience was at Cook County Jail, the largest single-site facility, larger than, I think, 90-plus acres. And we had gone there. It was the very first facility that I had visited. And I'll never forget that moment when we were exiting the facility, and we ended up stuck in traffic. And I had never been anywhere, never mind pictured a jail, that you could be stuck in traffic on the way out because there were so many individuals and workers who were there. And it took us 45 minutes to actually get outside of the jail facility. And to me, it was more of this understanding in context of just the universe that we were in within a policy issue area. So if you think back to that sidewalk image, this is another image for all of you to take away with. The other thing that I'll say, just as a note, I think for anyone who's like, oh, none of my data is in exactly the way that I want it, and I can't do the analysis, and it'll take me 99% of my time to actually get my data shaped the right way. One of the jails that we visited was really, really proud. They slid a one-pager over to us, and they said, we've never been able to accurately count how many people we have in the jail until recently. Here's a one-pager of the counts, male, female, etc. And for me, this was truly an understanding of, I think, a lot of talent that is across the entire country, that is here in the room. There's some really incredible work that can be done, I think, in public policy just at the descriptive analytics side for a lot of these jurisdictions, for a lot of these programs, and for a lot of these public policy issue areas. And so, of course, you're like, all right, Kelly, I've seen enough images, like show me some numbers and data. What was really interesting about the Data-Driven Justice Initiative, which was this nationwide coalition of a lot of different communities who had joined and signed on, was that we did not try to recreate the wheel. And I highly encourage all of you to remember that. Do not try to recreate the wheel. If you can figure out who is working on a similar challenge, go talk to them. And for us, this was identifying that the University of Chicago, this was Raed Ghani's former group there, for those of you who are familiar. A group of students actually took a look at the data, Johnson County, Kansas, and based off integrating a few of these different data sets, they were able to really look and say, this is a really compelling case on the right-hand side, this finding. A key predictor for someone on the list was being disconnected from mental health services around 2 years since the last contact. And for us, when we walked around the country, that all of those numbers, people said that cannot be right. It cannot possibly cost the county $250,000 per person on the low end of sending them to jail. And the more communities that we went to, there were some communities that had a handful of high frequent utilizers who were cycling in and out of jail, and they found that they had numbers upwards in the millions. That's how much their various systems were trying to respond to individuals who had mental health issues and needs. And so for me, again, when it comes to great analysis, try to figure out how can you tell that story, how can you encapsulate in such a way that you're really going to help move people along. I'm going to try to speed this up because I know I only have a couple more minutes with you all, but I want to segue and start talking. This is a photo of New York City Hall, in case you've never visited. I want to talk about what that all means. I've just told you all these stories. All right, Kelly, you've traveled a little bit. You've gone to different communities. I got a call one day to come interview for the Chief Analytics Officer position here. We are, I'm going to claim this, but the flagship data team throughout the country, and the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics has been around in some form or another for a decade. And I think that is a testament in and of itself to the great work that the prior staff and leaders on the team have done. And for me, it was incredibly humbling to come here, because when I was in Boston, when I was working at the White House, and even before then, this is the team to beat, right? This is the team that's working at the forefront. And to be able to say, how do we actually chart out a vision and a path was really, really interesting to me. This is an image of the New York City org chart. For anyone who thinks that they have a confusing org chart at their organization, this is ours. You can find it online. And for us, this was really exciting. We're here. We got written into the org chart. Office of Data Analytics. And I always tell this story because for me, it is incredibly important that we think about how to sustain and to build data infrastructure into our organizations. And I think for anyone who's paying attention to local governments, different cities across the country, people are trying to figure out, where do I put my data team? Should I put it under IT? Should I make it an office that reports into the executive office? Should it be hitched under the various agencies or programs? Like, do I need a data team for my marketing team? Do I need a data team for my sales team? And for us, we're really, really lucky that we got written into the org chart. And that has a lot to do with a lot of our team members and people over time being really, really crystal clear on what we're doing. We are here. We are a tiny dot. I'm going to assume that most of you know that this is pale blue dot, Carl Sagan. Look it up in case you don't know. But for us, within the broader cosmos of New York City, it feels some days like we're this dot. And I think for a lot of you, I'm not going to project here, it might feel like you're like this within your broader organizations. You're that like one small team that's working on data and analytics, and you're constantly trying to explain, what am I doing? What is my team doing? What are these projects that we're working on? And I think it's really, really important to acknowledge just how nimble you have to be. Our team is only a team of 10. And within the broader ecosystem, there are 325,000 government employees here in New York City. It's the fourth largest workforce, government workforce throughout the United States. And we have over 125 agencies, 8.6 million New Yorkers upon latest count, and the budget of the city is over $90 billion. So some days it feels like that's us, this tiny little dot. So I'm actually going to get a little concrete here with all of you now, which is I've spent a lot of time in government and private sector, and I'm not going to go into exactly what is data science, what do I think data science is, what do I think data science in government is, but I will put up this slide, which I've spent, I think, a year and change working with the team on, of what is data analytics? Because it's not just math. And I think for a lot of people who work within broader organizations, but certainly within governments, there's this question of like, what are you working on? And what are the ways that you can frame out what you're working on? And so for us, this is pretty straightforward. I think you can argue about the semantics of all of these. Descriptive analytics, what is happening or has happened? Diagnostic analytics, why is it happening? Predictive analytics, what will happen in the future? Prescriptive analytics, what should be done about it? And I think what's incredibly interesting for anyone who understands public policy, if you remember at the very beginning, is that your work can only start on the left-hand side. Your work has to start at the left-hand side. You have to understand everything that's up here before you can actually move to the right-hand side. There's no universe where you could start with prescriptive analytics without understanding what's happening, without understanding the underlying data. Sorry, I just had to get on that soapbox for a moment. And in terms of what do we actually do, I wanted to share this because this may be helpful depending on which industry that you're actually in. So the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics within New York City, we do many things, but broadly chunked into these 4. Advisory analytics, so in this case, it's the phone call that's, hey, we're doing something. Can I get your advice for an hour? Can I get on the phone with you or somebody from your team? So this is actually supporting agencies on the methodology that they're working on, strategies, or even what's top of mind within industry. So we get a lot of those calls, and we take them. The second is mechanical analytics projects. So this is, I think, what a lot of the conference sessions will entail, are people who are working on very clear, this is my analytics question, this is the data set that we have, and this is what we're actually trying to push forward on. This is our hypothesis that we're trying to test. We do those in partnership with city agencies. The really, really interesting items to me, which are slightly different, I think, for us, is that we have an analytics SWAT team. And that means, and this is not a separate team within the team, but that means that we could deploy if there is an emergency here in New York City. The best example of this was the Legionnaires' outbreak that occurred in 2015. The Mayor's Office of Data Analytics, or MODA as we're known, we deployed to actually do a lot of the number crunching and to integrate that data in an emergency context. And so you can take that, you can think about what are some parallels, what are some fast turn analyses that need to happen. And last but not least, executive or legislative analytics. This is a part of working within local government, specifically working within New York City. We do a lot of the work that is by law required for us to do, to actually analyze. So we have a lot of interesting work to do there. We do work on a lot of analyses that will inform policy. And so while I cannot get into the details of all of those analyses, these are some broad questions that we're currently working on. We work on helping people count. We work as advisors, we work cross agencies, and then we work to look at what are some policy impacts or assumptions or references that we should be thinking about. And I think if any of these questions strike you as these are actually really interesting questions you yourself have, that is the broader context in which we work within the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics, is thinking about what are some questions that we have about the world that we live in, about New York City specifically. It just so happens we get to do that for a living, which is pretty cool. What do we do? I encourage you to go online. Please, please, please read a little bit more about all of our work, bit.ly/MODA lib, and read on. We've done a ton of work supporting tenant anti-harassment efforts throughout the years, the universal pre-K rollout. Really our work spans a lot of different fields. So I'm going to try to wrap up relatively quickly here. As I noted toward the beginning, we are really, really fortunate and lucky here. We are here to stay. And I think that is something that is always a measure of success, is when people outside of your team, outside of your organization, are able to notice you and understand you. So we were actually written in December into the New York City Charter, which is in effect the Constitution of New York City, Local Law 222 of 2018. And this is something that we're incredibly proud about, because it means that we are moving forward, and one day, I don't know what it'll be like, but we'll be around for 40 years, like some of our partner agencies and offices. I'm going to talk and give one more plug on our open data program and portfolio. Somebody sent me a note on LinkedIn about our open data program, and I saw a few conference sessions about what is available on NYC open data and how to navigate it. We also, in addition to everything else that we work on, also manage and oversee the city's open data program. We have over 2,600 data sets that are available online. We are the country's largest municipal data store of free data on there. Some of our data sets, I think last year there were 10 million parking violation data sets. Like, you should actually go on there and further explore. It is an incredible, incredible resource. And earlier in September, we actually launched the next decade of open data in thinking about what the future of this is going to look like, and not just be open data for compliance's sake, because it is a law here in New York City that you're required to publish your data if it is public data. But I know a lot of folks are actually using the information. So if you look on the left-hand side here, this was really, really neat. The New York Times had done a piece using, the basis of the piece was finding permits for block parties throughout New York City. And they actually sent photographers out, so you can go look that up online. And on the right-hand side, this is a tool built by, I'm sure many of you have heard the name, Chris Wong, formerly of the Department of City Planning. A day in the life of an NYC taxi. The point of great analysis is, how do you engage folks? How do you engage them in a way that they may not actually be expecting? And I promised my deputy that I would now talk about squirrels all the time. I was a little skeptical when she said, I have this great idea, we should partner with the squirrel census. And I said, all right. And she won me over, because this has actually been an incredible, incredible story about the usage of NYC open data. First off, I had no idea that many people were passionate about squirrels. Maybe it's like a New York City thing, but this is like taken off. The squirrel census is an incredibly passionate group of individuals. You'll see this is actually a photo of Adrian's desk, because I walked in one morning and burst out laughing. She had the data visualization from the squirrel census done of Central Park up by her desk. And so for me, continuing to think about how do you engage using the data, how do you engage using analytics, is so, so critical to the work that we do. Have a little fun along the way. So now that I've talked to you a little bit about everything that's done throughout the country, and a little bit about what the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics does, I think the thing that I want to close with is to remember that it's not just our little team or your little team, but that there's a whole big team out there of like-minded folks. What's really, really been incredible is that also over the last 10 years, as the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics has grown, so have other data teams, the fire department, the buildings department, the parks department across the city. And so I'm seeing like little data teams emerge throughout all of these city agencies. And for me, that is the point of all of this work. The point of all of this work is not that people continue to come to you. The point is that there's other people that they can go to throughout the organizations and throughout the work that we do. I struggled a lot as a Bostonian to like put up a New York City story image, and put up friends. I was gonna do Goodwill Hunting, which is what I usually do if I'm not in New York City. But I put this up here in part because our work is about finding your tribe, as I talked about. But it's also about good storytelling. And I think for anyone who has traveled outside of the United States, people's understanding of American culture is like New York City culture, and it's basically anything that happens on Friends, they'll just ask you, does that really happen in America? And I put this up because I always want you to remember to tell that story, to figure out how to tell the story, to find the other people who can tell the stories with you. That's what great analysis is all about. That's what a lot of incredible, incredible public servants, a few good ones, and I think an emerging number of them have done. These are just photos. This is potluck from 2 or 3 weeks ago. But these are just photos over time of the incredible people that I've worked with and that I can continue to call upon. And I think for anyone here who hopefully I have not talked your ear off, but if you're ever interested in working for government, working as a civil servant, as a public servant, at any point in your career, send me a note. Would love to chat a little bit more. I hope you guys have an incredible, incredible time here for the rest of the PyData conference. I just want to say a huge thank you to the organizers and the folks who invited me today, and I hope this was a good kickoff for you all this morning. Thank you.